This story that seemed impossible actually happened to me. I was so shocked when it happened. Let me tell you about it. Come with me as we begin. My ex-husband took our twins and kept me away from them for 2 long years. I fought every single day to see my babies, but he built walls I could not break through. Then one of them got cancer and needed a donor. The paternity test that followed exposed his darkest secret to the entire family. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have not already. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about my own life. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everybody knows your name and your business. My father worked as a carpenter, building furniture with his hands, and my mother was a nurse at the local hospital. We did not have much money, but we had love. We had Sunday dinners and front porch conversations. We had the kind of warmth that money cannot buy. I was always the trusting type, maybe too trusting. I saw the good in people sometimes, even when it was not there. My mama used to say that my heart was too big for my own good. She worried that someone would take advantage of that one day. I wish I had listened to her more carefully. After high school, I went to college and studied accounting. It was not glamorous, but it was steady work. I got a job at an insurance company in Columbus, and I rented a small apartment that I decorated with thrift store finds and hand-me-down furniture. Life was simple, and I was content. I dreamed of falling in love, getting married, having children. The American dream, you know, a house with a yard, a dog, kids running around. I wanted it all. Then I met Derek. It was at a company party, one of those networking events where everyone stands around with drinks in their hands, pretending to be interested in small talk. Derek was different. He walked into the room like he owned it, which I later learned was because he practically did. His father was a retired judge, his family had money, and Derek was a successful lawyer at one of the biggest firms in the city. He was charming. Lord, was he charming. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. When he looked at me, his eyes locked onto mine like nothing else mattered. He remembered every detail I told him. He sent flowers the next day. He called when he said he would call. He opened doors and pulled out chairs. He was everything I thought I wanted. We dated for a year, and it was like a fairy tale. He took me to fancy restaurants and weekend getaways. He introduced me to his world of country clubs and charity galas. I felt like Cinderella at the ball, except I never quite fit in. His mother, Patricia, made sure I knew that. From the very first time I met her, she looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her designer shoes. She never said anything directly rude, but her comments cut just the same. She would ask about my family, and then raise her eyebrows when I mentioned my father was a carpenter. She would compliment my dress, and then say something like, "It is so brave of you to wear something like that to an event like this." Derek always dismissed my concerns. He said his mother was just protective. She would warm up to me eventually. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. I was in love, and love makes you blind to so many things. We got married after that first year. The wedding was beautiful and expensive, paid for entirely by his family. I wanted a small ceremony at my childhood church, but Patricia insisted on a grand affair at the country club. I should have seen then how things would always be. What Patricia wanted, Patricia got, and Derek never stood up against her. When I found out I was pregnant with twins, I thought it would bring us closer together. Derek seemed happy at first. He talked about buying a bigger house, setting up a nursery, all the things expectant fathers talk about. But as my belly grew, he seemed to shrink away. He worked later and later. He traveled more for business. He was distant in ways I could not understand. I noticed little things. His phone was always face down. He would leave the room to take calls. He came home smelling like perfume that was not mine. I told myself I was being paranoid. Pregnancy hormones, I said. Just my imagination. Patricia was at our house constantly critiquing everything I did. The way I decorated the nursery was wrong. The names I wanted for the babies were too common. The way I ate, dressed, walked, breathed. Nothing was ever good enough for the mother of her grandchildren. When I gave birth to the twins, it was the happiest and scariest day of my life. I had a cesarean section because of complications. They put me under completely, and when I woke up there, they were 2 perfect little babies, a boy and a girl, Ethan and Emma. I held them in my arms and felt a love I had never known before. It was overwhelming, consuming, absolute. I would have done anything for them. I would have died for them. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not Patricia's coldness, not Derek's distance, not the nagging feeling that something was wrong in my marriage. I had my babies, and they were everything. For the first 18 months, I devoted myself entirely to being a mother. I quit my job because Derek said we did not need the money, and it was better for the children. I stayed home, changed diapers, sang lullabies, rocked them to sleep. I watched them learn to smile, to laugh, to crawl, to walk. Every milestone was a gift. Derek was barely present. He blamed work, and I accepted his excuses. I was too tired to fight, too consumed with the babies, to notice just how far he had drifted. When he did come home, he would barely look at me. He played with the twins for a few minutes, then retreated to his office or went back out for more work. Patricia came by almost every day. She undermined me constantly. She told me I was holding the babies wrong, feeding them wrong, raising them wrong. She said I was not fit to be a mother in a family like theirs. I smiled and nodded and died a little inside each time. I should have seen what was coming. The signs were all there. But I was so focused on my children, so desperate to make my marriage work, that I missed everything. And then one night, everything shattered. The twins were 18 months old when I found the messages. Derek had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered, and it buzzed with a notification. I would not normally look, but something made me pick it up that night. Call it intuition, call it fate, call it the universe finally forcing me to see what I had been blind to. The message was from someone named Lauren. It said, "I miss you. When can I see you again?" My hands trembled as I scrolled through their conversation. There were hundreds of messages going back over 2 years. Love notes, plans for secret meetings, intimate photographs. They talked about me, mocking me, laughing at how oblivious I was. Derek called me boring. Lauren called me pathetic. 2 years. They had been together longer than my children had been alive. Their affair started before I even got pregnant. When Derek came out of the shower, I confronted him. I expected him to deny it, to lie, to grovel. Instead, he shrugged. He told me it was my fault. I had let myself go during the pregnancy. I was always tired, always focused on the babies. I had stopped being fun. I had stopped paying attention to him. He said, "You were so busy with the kids you forgot about me." I could not believe what I was hearing. I had given up my career, my independence, my entire identity to raise our children. And he blamed me for his betrayal. I screamed at him. I threw things. I cried until I had no tears left. He moved out that night. And just 3 days later, he filed for divorce. What happened next was a nightmare I could not wake up from. Derek hired the best lawyers in the state. His father's connections ran deep, and suddenly I was facing a legal team I could not possibly match. I could only afford a court-appointed attorney, a young woman fresh out of law school who did her best but was hopelessly outmatched. Derek and his family built a case against me that was full of lies. They claimed I had severe postpartum depression. They said I was unstable, violent, unfit to care for children. They produced witnesses I had never met, who claimed to have seen me screaming at my babies, neglecting them, even hitting them. None of it was true. Not a single word. But it did not matter. The judge assigned to our case was an old friend of Derek's father. The legal system that was supposed to protect me became a weapon used against me. The custody hearing was the worst day of my life. I sat in that courtroom and listened to stranger after stranger lie about who I was as a mother. Patricia testified that she had witnessed me being aggressive with the twins. A neighbor I barely knew said she heard me yelling through the walls. Even Derek got on the stand and shed crocodile tears as he expressed concern for the safety of his children. My lawyer objected when she could, but it felt like fighting the tide with a teaspoon. The judge barely looked at me. His decision was probably made before I even walked into the room. Full custody went to Derek. I was granted supervised visitation twice a month, 2 hours at a time. When the judge read the ruling, I collapsed. I literally fell to my knees in that courtroom sobbing, begging for someone to listen. No one did. They took my babies away from me. Ethan and Emma were screaming, reaching for me as Derek carried them out of the courtroom. I can still hear their cries. I hear them in my dreams. I hear them when I close my eyes. That sound will haunt me until the day I die. At first, Derek honored the visitation schedule. Every 2 weeks, I would go to a supervised facility and spend 2 hours with my children. It was torture being watched by strangers, limited in what I could say or do. But at least I could hold them. At least I could tell them I loved them. At least I could see their faces. Then Derek started canceling. The kids are sick, he would say. We have a family event. We are traveling. There was always an excuse, always a reason. My visitation dropped from twice a month to once a month to nothing at all. After 6 months, he moved. No warning, no forwarding address. One day I showed up for my visitation, and the facility told me there was no appointment scheduled. I drove to his house, and it was empty. He was gone. My children were gone, and I had no idea where to find them. I went to the police, but they said it was a civil matter. I went to my lawyer, but she said without knowing where Derek had moved, there was nothing we could do. I hired a private investigator with the little money I had saved, but I ran out of funds before he could find anything. I was lost. Completely, utterly lost. The next 2 years were the darkest of my life. Without my children, I had nothing. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. I lost my job because I could not focus on anything except the emptiness inside me. I spent hours staring at photographs of Ethan and Emma, wondering where they were, if they were safe, if they missed me as much as I missed them. I moved back home to Ohio, back to my parents' house. It was humiliating, a 32-year-old woman living in her childhood bedroom, but I had nowhere else to go. My mother held me while I cried. My father paced the floors, helpless to fix something that could not be fixed. Some nights I wanted to give up entirely. The pain was so overwhelming that I thought about just ending it all. But something kept me going. Some tiny spark deep inside me that refused to be extinguished. My children needed me even if they did not know it. Even if I could not be with them, I had to believe that one day I would find them again. I got a job at a local grocery store stocking shelves and bagging groceries. It was not much, but it gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I saved every penny I could, hoping to hire another investigator, to find a better lawyer, to somehow track down my babies. I wrote letters to Ethan and Emma that I could not send because I did not know where they were. I told them about my day, about how much I loved them, about how I would never stop fighting for them. I kept the letters in a box under my bed. Hundreds of them, pages and pages of words they might never read. Meanwhile, I had no idea what was happening to my children. I did not know that Derek had remarried, that Lauren had moved into his new house as his wife. I did not know that Patricia was practically raising the twins, while Lauren showed no interest in them at all. I did not know that my babies were being told their mother had abandoned them, that I did not want them anymore, that I had left and was never coming back. Emma, my sweet girl, cried for me constantly at first. She asked where Mommy was, why Mommy did not come to visit anymore. They told her I was gone. They told her to forget about me. Eventually, she stopped asking, but she never stopped remembering. She told me later that she used to whisper my name into her pillow at night, hoping somehow I would hear. Ethan became withdrawn. He was always a sensitive child, and the loss of his mother affected him deeply. He stopped playing with other children. He got sick frequently. He would not eat properly. The doctors said it was just a phase, that he would grow out of it. No one realized that he was grieving for a mother he had been told did not love him. I knew none of this at the time. All I knew was the ache in my chest that never went away. I knew the empty arms that longed to hold my children. I knew the prayer I said every night, begging God or the universe or whatever force might be listening to bring my babies back to me. One day, about 18 months after I lost them, I finally tracked down Derek's new address. A former colleague of his mentioned at a party that Derek had moved to Pennsylvania, and word got back to me through a mutual friend. I drove 8 hours to find them arriving on a cold October evening just before the twins' 4th birthday. I parked across the street from their house. It was a big house, bigger than the one we had shared. Through the windows, I could see decorations for a birthday party, balloons and streamers, and a banner that said "Happy Birthday." And then I saw them. My babies. They walked past the window so much bigger than I remembered. Emma had grown so tall. Ethan's hair was longer. They were laughing about something, and my heart broke and soared at the same time. I wanted to run to the door, to pound on it, until someone let me in, to grab my children and hold them and never let go. But I knew what would happen if I did. Derek would call the police. I would be arrested for trespassing, maybe worse. I would lose any chance I had of ever getting them back legally. So I sat in my car and watched from a distance. I watched the party through the windows. I watched my children blow out candles on a cake I did not bake. I watched them open presents I did not give them. And when it was over, when the lights went out and the house went dark, I drove back to Ohio with tears streaming down my face. That night, I made a promise to myself. I would not give up. No matter how long it took, no matter what I had to do, I would get my children back. I did not know how. I did not know when. But I knew with absolute certainty that this was not the end of our story. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at work restocking canned vegetables on a shelf when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost did not answer because I did not recognize the number. Something made me pick up anyway. The voice on the other end was Derek. I had not heard from him in 2 years, and for a moment I could not even process that it was real. His voice sounded different, smaller somehow. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. "Meredith," he said, "it is Ethan. He is sick." My heart stopped. "What do you mean sick? He has leukemia. The doctors found it a few weeks ago. He has been doing chemotherapy, but he needs a bone marrow transplant. We tested everyone in the family, but no one is a match. We need you to come and get tested." The world tilted beneath my feet. My son, my baby boy, cancer. The word echoed in my mind, sharp and terrifying and impossible. I did not hesitate. I did not ask questions about custody or visitation or any of the legal battles we had fought. None of that mattered anymore. My child needed me, and I would be there. I told my manager I had a family emergency and walked out of the store. I did not even take off my apron. I drove straight home, threw some clothes in a bag, and told my parents what had happened. My mother wanted to come with me, but I told her I needed to do this alone. My father pressed his truck keys into my hand because my old car might not make the trip. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas. The hours blurred together, mile after mile of dark highway illuminated only by my headlights. I prayed out loud the entire way. I bargained with God. I promised anything and everything if he would just let my son be okay. When I arrived at the hospital in Pennsylvania, the sun was just coming up. I had not slept in over 24 hours, but I felt wide awake, running on adrenaline and desperation. The pediatric oncology ward was on the 4th floor. I walked down the hallway, my legs shaking, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then I found his room. Ethan was lying in a hospital bed that seemed far too big for his small body. He was so thin, so pale. His head was bald from the chemotherapy, and there were tubes connected to his arms. He looked nothing like the chubby, laughing toddler I remembered. But his eyes, when he opened his eyes and looked at me, they were the same. Those beautiful brown eyes that I had gazed into 1,000 times when he was a baby. He looked at me with confusion, at first not recognizing this strange woman standing in his doorway. Then Emma turned around. My daughter. She was sitting in a chair beside her brother's bed, and when she saw me, her whole face changed. I watched recognition dawn in her eyes, followed by disbelief, followed by something that looked like hope. "Mommy," she whispered. That single word broke me. I crossed the room in 3 steps and fell to my knees beside her chair. She threw her arms around my neck and burst into tears. "They said you left us," she sobbed. "They said you did not want us anymore. I knew it was not true. I knew you would come back." I held her so tight, afraid that if I let go, she would disappear again. I told her I was sorry, so sorry, that I had never stopped looking for them, that I loved them more than anything in the world. Ethan watched us with those big eyes of his. He was too weak to move much, but he reached out one small hand toward me. I took it in mine and kissed his fingers. "Hi, baby," I said through my tears. "Mommy is here now. Mommy is right here, and I am not going anywhere." He smiled, just a tiny smile, but it lit up his whole face. "Mom," he said. His voice was hoarse from the treatments, barely more than a whisper, but it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I sat between my 2 children, holding both of them, crying tears of joy and grief and rage all mixed together. 2 years. I had missed 2 years of their lives. And now my son was fighting for his life, and I had almost missed that too. Derek appeared in the doorway a few minutes later. He looked terrible, exhausted, and disheveled, nothing like the polished lawyer I had married. Lauren was with him, standing slightly behind her face, unreadable. Patricia arrived shortly after, her expression pinched with distaste when she saw me there. I did not care about any of them. Let them hate me. Let them glare and whisper and scheme. I was with my children, and nothing else mattered. Derek cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice was stiff, formal, as if we were strangers meeting for the first time. "I did not come for you," I replied, without looking at him. "I came for my son. We need to get you tested," he continued. "The sooner the better. The doctors are waiting." I kissed both children and promised I would be right back. Then I followed a nurse to the laboratory where they drew blood and swabbed my cheek for the testing. The nurse explained that they would run the samples and have results within a few days. I went back to Ethan's room and did not leave for the rest of the day. I slept in the chair beside his bed that night, my hand resting on his arm so he would know I was there, even in his dreams. 3 days later, the doctor asked to meet with Derek and me privately. We went to a small conference room down the hall from Ethan's room. The doctor was an older man with kind eyes and a serious expression. He had a folder in front of him that he kept looking at, as if the papers inside contained something troubling. "Thank you both for coming," he began. "I have the results from the compatibility testing." He paused, and I could tell something was wrong. "Mrs. Harrison, I am afraid you are not a match for Ethan." My heart sank. I had been so sure, so hopeful, that I would be the one to save my son. "No," I said, "there has to be a mistake. Can we test again?" The doctor held up his hand. "That is not all." He opened the folder and looked at both of us. "In the process of testing, we ran a standard DNA analysis. There is no easy way to say this. Mrs. Harrison, you are not Ethan's biological mother." The room went silent. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. What I said, "That is impossible. I gave birth to him. I was pregnant with twins. I had a C-section, and they put both babies in my arms." The doctor looked uncomfortable. "The DNA does not lie. You are Emma's biological mother. But Ethan shares no genetic material with you at all." I turned to look at Derek. His face had gone white. He was staring at the doctor like a man watching his own execution. "Derek," I said slowly, "what did you do?" He did not answer. He could not answer. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The pieces started to come together in my mind. Lauren had been his mistress for years, even before I got pregnant. What if Lauren had also been pregnant at the same time? What if she had given birth around the same time I did? What if somehow, impossibly, horrifically, they had switched one of my babies for hers? I stood up so fast my chair fell over. "Where is my son?" I demanded. "Derek, where is my real son?" He finally found his voice. "Meredith, please let me explain. Explain that you stole my child, that you gave me someone else's baby, and took mine away." I was screaming now, not caring who heard. "How could you do this? How could you?" The doctor stepped between us. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation with the hospital administrator present," he said, "and possibly law enforcement." I did not wait for anyone else. I stormed out of the room and found Patricia in the hallway. She had been listening at the door, and when she saw my face, she knew. She knew that I knew. "You were part of this," I said. It was not a question. "You helped them do this to me." She drew herself up, trying to maintain her dignity, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "You do not understand," she said. "It was for the best. Lauren's child deserved to be raised as a legitimate heir. Your child was fine. He was taken care of. My child." She said it so casually, like we were discussing arrangements for a pet. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Where is my son?" Patricia pressed her lips together and refused to answer. But Stephanie, Derek's sister, had also been listening. She had come to the hospital to support her brother, not knowing what she was about to learn. Her face was pale with shock. "Mom," she said. "What did you do?" Patricia turned on her daughter. "Stay out of this, Stephanie. This is family business." Stephanie shook her head. No, this is insane. You cannot just swap babies." She looked at me, and for the first time I saw sympathy in her eyes. "I am so sorry. I did not know. I swear, I did not know." Later, after the police arrived and the interviews began, the whole story came out. Lauren had indeed been pregnant at the same time as me. She gave birth at the same hospital just 2 days before I did. Her son was perfectly healthy, born without complications. When I went in for my cesarean, Derek saw an opportunity. He bribed a nurse to switch one of my twins with Lauren's son. The nurse was already gone, moved to another state with a generous payment from the family. The hospital records had been falsified. Birth certificates had been forged. My son, my real son, had been taken by Lauren's mother to Florida. He had been raised there for 4 years, believing he was the child of a different family. His name was Brandon. When I heard his name, I collapsed. Brandon! I had a son named Brandon whom I had never met. A son who was 4 years old, who had been stolen from me before I even knew he existed. The police launched an investigation. Derek was arrested on charges of child trafficking fraud and falsification of documents. Lauren was arrested as well. Patricia was taken into custody for her role in the conspiracy. The scandal made national news. Cameras surrounded the hospital. Reporters shouted questions at anyone who came in or out. Through it all, I stayed by Ethan's side. Even knowing he was not my biological child, I could not abandon him. I had raised him for 18 months. I had loved him, fed him, rocked him to sleep. He called me mom. Biology did not change that. He was innocent in all of this, a pawn used by adults, who should have protected him. And my daughter Emma stayed close to me too, refusing to leave my side. She did not fully understand what was happening, but she knew something terrible had been done. She held my hand and told me she loved me. She said she was glad I came back. I told her I loved her too. I told her I would never leave again, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. But before I could deal with any of that, I had to find Brandon, my real son, the child I had never known. The authorities tracked him down in Florida, living with Lauren's mother in a small house outside Tampa. She had been told that Brandon was her grandson, Lauren's child from a previous relationship. She did not know the truth about where he came from. I flew to Florida with a social worker and a police escort. The flight was only 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity. I kept looking at the photograph they had given me. A 4-year-old boy with sandy brown hair and blue eyes. Eyes like mine. Eyes like my mother's. When we arrived at the house, Lauren's mother answered the door. Her name was Gloria, and she looked confused and scared when she saw the officials standing on her porch. When they explained why we were there, she started to cry. I did not know she kept saying, "Lauren told me he was hers." I believed her. I would never have taken someone else's child. They brought Brandon out to meet me. He was playing in the backyard when we arrived, and he looked up at all the strangers with wary eyes. He was beautiful, more beautiful than I could have imagined. And when I looked at his face, I saw Emma. I saw myself. I saw my parents. He did not know who I was. How could he? He had been told his whole life that his mother was someone else. But I knelt down in front of him and smiled through my tears. "Hi, Brandon," I said. "My name is Meredith. I am going to be taking care of you from now on." He looked at me for a long moment, studying my face. Then he asked, "Are you nice?" I almost laughed. "I hope so," I said. "I am going to try very hard to be nice to you." It was not easy those first few weeks. Brandon was confused and scared. He missed Gloria, who had been kind to him even if she was not his real grandmother. He did not understand why everything was changing. But slowly, day by day, we started to become a family. Emma was wonderful with him. She took to being a big sister immediately, even though they were the same age. She showed him her toys, taught him the songs I used to sing to her, helped him feel safe. Watching them together made my heart swell with a love I cannot describe. And Ethan recovered. Against all odds, the National Bone Marrow Registry found a donor match. A stranger on the other side of the country who had signed up years ago and happened to be a perfect match for a little boy he would never meet. The transplant was successful. Slowly, Ethan's strength returned. His hair started to grow back. His smile came back too. I filed for custody of all 3 children. Emma was mine by blood and by right. Brandon was mine by blood, stolen from me at birth. And Ethan, even though he was Lauren's biological child, had no one else. Lauren was in prison. She had never been a real mother to him anyway. Gloria was too elderly to take on a young child. Derek was going away for a long time. The judge granted me custody of all 3. In the end, it was not even a difficult decision. The evidence was overwhelming. The wrong that had been done was clear to everyone. This time, justice was on my side. I remember the day I brought them all home to Ohio. 3 children in the back seat of a rental car, looking out the windows at a landscape they had never seen. Emma held Brandon's hand. Ethan sat quietly, still tired from his recovery, but peaceful. My parents were waiting on the front porch when we pulled up. My mother was crying. My father had built a swing set in the backyard. They had converted my old bedroom into a room for the kids with 3 beds and fresh paint and new curtains. "Welcome home," my father said. And for the first time in years, I believed it. I was home. We all were. That was 3 years ago. 3 years since I got my children back. 3 years since the truth came out. 3 years of healing, growing, learning to be a family again. It was not easy. I will not pretend it was. Brandon had nightmares for months. He would wake up crying, asking for Gloria, confused about where he was. I held him through every nightmare, whispered comfort in his ear, promised him that he was safe, that I would never let anyone take him away. Emma struggled too. She had been old enough to remember some of what happened. She had heard the lies they told about me, and even though she knew the truth now, those words had left scars. We went to family therapy together, all 4 of us learning how to trust again, how to communicate, how to process the trauma we had all been through. Ethan had the longest road to recovery. The cancer treatments had weakened his body, and even after the transplant, he needed months of follow-up care. But he is healthy now, strong and healthy and full of energy. He plays soccer with the neighborhood kids. He laughs at silly jokes. He calls me mom, and I have never once corrected him. Because he is my son. Maybe not by blood, but in every way that matters. I raised him. I fought for him. I sat by his hospital bed and held his hand and prayed for his life. Blood does not make a family. Love does. Derek was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Lauren got 12. Patricia received 5 years of probation and was forbidden from ever contacting the children. I do not think about them often. They took up too much space in my life for too long. I have better things to focus on now. Stephanie and I became friends, surprisingly. She testified against her own family, telling the court everything she knew about their schemes. She was horrified by what they had done and wanted to make amends in whatever way she could. She visits sometimes, and the kids call her Aunt Steph. She is nothing like her mother or her brother. She is kind and genuine and fiercely protective of the children. I am glad they have her in their lives. I eventually went back to school and got certified as a social worker. I wanted to help other families who were going through custody battles, who felt powerless against a system that did not always work the way it should. I work at a nonprofit now advocating for parents' rights and children's welfare. It does not pay much, but it pays enough. And more importantly, it gives me purpose. I also started writing a blog sharing my story with others. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages from mothers who had lost their children, from fathers fighting for custody, from grandparents trying to protect their grandchildren. My story gave them hope. It showed them that even when everything seems impossible, the truth can find a way to the light. The children are 7 now. They go to the same school ride, the same bus play together every day. Emma is artistic and loves to draw. Brandon is athletic and always has a ball in his hands. Ethan is the peacemaker, the one who settles arguments and makes sure everyone is included. They are different in so many ways, but they love each other fiercely. Last week, Emma asked me a question. She said, "Mom, why did those people do those bad things?" I thought about it for a long time before I answered. I said, some people get so focused on what they want that they forget about what is right. They make choices that hurt other people because they are not thinking about anyone except themselves. But that does not mean we have to become like them. We can choose to be kind. We can choose to be honest. We can choose to love. She nodded, thinking it over. Then she said, "I am glad you chose to love us." "Me too, baby," I said. "Me too." There are still hard days. Days when the memories come flooding back and the pain feels fresh again. Days when I think about the 2 years I lost with my children and the years I lost with Brandon, years I can never get back. But I do not let those days define me. I have learned that healing is not a destination. It is a journey. And every day I take another step. If you are going through something similar, if someone has taken your children, your hope, your faith in humanity, please know this. The truth has a way of finding the light. Your story is not over. Keep fighting. Do not let anyone tell you that you are not strong enough, not good enough, not worthy of your own children. You are. You always have been. And one day when you are on the other side of the storm, you will look back and realize just how far you have come. I want to ask you something before we say goodbye. Have you ever faced a situation where you felt completely powerless, where the system seemed stacked against you? How did you find the strength to keep going? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they are not alone. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next one. And share this video with someone who might need a reminder that hope is never lost. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for listening, for caring, for being part of this community. I am sending love and strength to every single one of you. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Remember, no matter how dark the night gets, the sun always rises, and your dawn is coming.